Welcome to Rogue Bogues. This is episode 6 of the My Journey series. Thanks for joining us again. This one is going to be about my sophomore year at the University of Utah. So that covers the 2004-2005 college season for me personally, playing with the University of Utah, running Utes. So this podcast, this episode specifically is going to be a little bit different than we have had the last 5 My Journeys. So I managed to secure 2 guests for my sophomore year to chat about everything that's going on. So instead of me going through everything, then hearing 2 individuals covering the same kind of points, it might bore a lot of you to hear the same thing 3 times. So just quickly, I will welcome back Cody Fueger, who was on the My Journey episode 4, discussed my freshman year. He was the team manager. For those who haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to do so you get a bit of feel for who he is and how he was involved in my college journey and beyond. But basically this season was a transition period. We have gone from Rick Majerus, very hard-nosed coach, to someone who we thought was going to take over in Kerry Rupp, who was the head assistant, not to be a gentleman by the name of Ray Giacoletti, however different people pronounce it, but generally it's Giacoletti. And he was hired out of the University of Eastern Washington, a small school that punched above their weight the season before we hired him, and didn't know anything about him, didn't know who he was, kind of going in blind. I think Cody was in a similar situation. So a big transition for not only myself, but Cody, going from working for a guy like Rick Majerus, basically being his personal assistant, to now a fresh-faced college coach who was, the first time was the head of a bigger program than he'd ever been. So a little bit of nervousness there from Ray Giacoletti, but did a fantastic job, as we'll discuss. But I will leave you with part 2 of the interview with Cody regarding my sophomore year. So here that is. So welcome back, Cody Fueger again. We're going to talk about my sophomore year. It was obviously a transition from Rick Majerus. Welcome, Cody.
What's up, Bogues? Happy to be on here, man. This is awesome.
Again, you get 2 parts, man. You're big time.
Yeah. Well, I was around for a couple of great years of your life, man, and we're still really close to this day. So
that's it. And another tidbit I've got to mention: I was part of the groomsmen at your wedding. So that was not too long after that. I can't remember what year. I'm sure. I hope you know the year. It was what, 06, 07, 08, somewhere around there.
2008. Yeah, you flew out for basically 3 days and
Australia. Yeah, it was off season.
I don't know how much you slept during that time, but you stayed up through the night for most of the time and slept during the day.
Yeah, we had some fun. But I guess that off season was interesting because we went from Rick Majerus, Kerry Rupp took over, and we had a successful end to that year, made the tournament. So we all thought that Kerry Rupp was the front runner to get that job, and we all went to bat for him with Chris Hill when we met with the athletic director, and as I'm sure you probably did as well, we thought Kerry Rupp was the right guy. But I guess something out of left field was the University of Utah had decided to bring someone new in. I guess they probably didn't want a Majerus disciple to remain. They probably wanted to just a clean, fresh slate, which is totally understandable. I think Kerry Rupp was qualified to take that job, but they just wanted to wash off that Majerus past with everything going on with the potential investigation. So I was at the Olympics. Leading into that Olympics, we hire a gentleman by the name of Ray Giacoletti, and he was at the University of Eastern Washington, a smaller school, won a lot of games there, and he came in, and I was honestly, as you know, I was at a crossroad of coming back to the University of Utah. I felt like I was kind of sold a lemon with everything I'd expected coming in. At times under Coach Majerus, at least, I don't feel like I could play my natural game, and I just lost a lot of confidence playing in the system sometimes with Coach, just because of the nature of the way he coached and with freshmen. But so I was at a crossroad of, do I just go pro straight to Europe for a year and then go to the NBA, or do I enter the draft? I was a late first round, early second round projected pick at that point, and then Ray got the job. But I think you remember the first thing that happened and that Ray did when he got the job, right?
Yeah, the first thing Coach Giacoletti did was he flew right to Australia to meet with you. Or were you in the Olympics already?
I was in Australia, yeah. So he basically treated me as a recruit.
Yeah, he knew that was his number one thing. So he wasn't even on campus his first couple of days. He flew straight to Australia to see you and get you to come back to the University of Utah, which is the best thing he could have done, obviously. And I just remember that was top priority number one for him, because I got to talk to him like just for a couple minutes right away. And then he's like, I'm out. I'm flying to Australia.
Yeah. And it was a big difference from obviously Coach Majerus. Ray, Coach Jack was kind of not as experienced and didn't have the presence and the aura, was kind of working his way up to that. But I think the biggest thing that shocked me when he came out was you could just have there was no real craziness or quirkiness that Rick had. So it was kind of a nice fresh change for me. So then just the gesture, like he really didn't have to say anything when he got to Australia, to be honest. It was just the gesture that he got on an 18, 19 hour trip one way and then back. So 40 hours just to look me in the face and say, we want you here. That was kind of enough for me.
Yeah. That's the kind of guy Coach Giacoletti is, right? Once he tells you something, he's going to do it. And he was really excited about that. And that was number one. And it was an unbelievable job getting you to come back. It was awesome.
Yeah, so then I go on to play I make the Olympic team in 2004, Athens Olympics. I thought I'd be in the mix. I didn't know I'd make the team, and then I ended up making it. I ended up starting at the 4 spot at the time. And I remember going into that Olympics and playing really well against grown men and pros, and played against the USA team and Tim Duncan and all these guys that Rick Majerus used to talk about, and actually held my own. I think I had 12-8 or something like that in Olympic games against those guys, played well. And I remember leaving that Olympic group and just coming back to Utah and just saying, like, there's no one in college basketball can guard me, no one can stop me. And I just had the mindset of being absolutely dominant because I felt like now I was coming back to play with kids. So I don't know if you noticed, but the jump that I made coming from that off season to my sophomore year.
Oh, for sure. I could tell just like kind of your swagger about you, and just kind of like your confidence coming back from the Olympics, right when you came back in fall. I could definitely tell a huge difference. Just kind of your approach right after that was just a little bit different, a little bit more. You always had an incredible approach to the game because you wanted to be great, but I could tell there was just like a higher IQ approach to it, I guess, and I could see that right away as soon as you came back, and any kind of things that, Coach Giacoletti kind of talked to you about, you took in stride right away. So that was a pretty cool deal. And just to see you play in those Olympics, I know us as a team, everybody in Utah, we kind of watch those together once in a while, and it was pretty cool to watch you together.
Yeah, and look, there was some growing pains. We chatted about it through text back and forth before we got on the pod, but there was one training session in particular. I still remember how everything went down. We had Luke Neville, the other Australian kid, and he was actually a pretty good player. He just didn't bring it every day. He'd show you what he could do once a week, once every 2 weeks, and then the other days he wouldn't bring it. But I remember we had one session, and it was early on in the season, and I believe we were a team that didn't front the post ever. Like Giacoletti just didn't like fronting. He did not like fronting the post, which for those listeners that don't understand what that means, it means that I as a defender get in front of the post player and just try to deny him from catching the ball at all costs, right? So we wouldn't do that. And I remember this session, Luke Neville was kicking my ass. Like it was pissing me off so bad because we have to play behind. We don't want to front. And he's hitting fadeaways, he's hitting hook shots, he's dunking it. And it was that one session where he just couldn't be stopped, right? So I got frustrated and I'm like, I got to change something up. He's kicking my ass. So I start fronting the post. And Ray Giacoletti blows his whistle and he says, we don't front the post. And I'm like, well, he's kicking my ass. Like, what am I supposed to do? He's like, just stick with our team principles. And at that point, I was like, I know better than you kind of mentality, young and dumb. And I guess the next play down, he catches it and scores. I don't front. I look at the coaches. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, let me front him. So I come down and front again. He blows a whistle again. And then we have a back and forth. And it was pretty heated. Like it was, I guess, a good debate at the start, but then it got back and forth. And Ray Giacoletti was like, get the fuck out of here. And I was like, fuck you. And we went backwards and forwards. And then I got kicked out of practice. And it was, a point where it was like, okay, I didn't really realize I was the leader of that team at that point. So it was bad from that point of view, but a bit of fire is good. But I ended up going back to my apartment at the time and having to think about it. And we end up rehashing everything. He benched me for the next game as a punishment, which was fine. But I guess that was that turning point in my sophomore year where beyond that, there was no issues after that. But I mean, I'm sure you remember that incident.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I remember that to this day. And, Coach Giacoletti blew that whistle and said, get out of practice. You walked out. But you came back that next day, and you were by far the best teammate. I mean, you were only a sophomore. Shoot, you're a still a 19-year-old at that point. So you were still kind of figuring some things out. But I mean, there was nothing stopping you when you came back after that. You're the best teammate I've ever seen, and you had all these guys believing in you after that. And then you're just, I mean, I know we'll talk about the season as we go through here, but that was the turning point for you that I saw at your second year at Utah.
Yeah, and then for me, that season was then freedom coming from Coach Majerus and a heavy structure of what you can and can't do. To Ray Giacoletti kind of gave me the keys to the team and said, you do you. Everyone else is going to have a bit more rules, but you've earned your fact to go one-on-one when you want, because he came from a system that was very regimented too in Eastern Washington, but he tweaked that and let me kind of do my thing at times, and not from a selfish point of view, but made me kind of read the play myself and attack when I wanted to. And look, we end up going, I believe we go 29-6 overall, 13-1 in conference. We have an 18-game winning streak at one point in the season. I think it was leading the nation. We had a fantastic year. We go to the Sweet 16. We lose to Kentucky in the Sweet 16. I still believe we were one shooting four-man away. I mean, Justin Hawkins was real streaky, and I think at one point in that season, he was 0 for 18 or 0 for 19 from three until he hit his first three-point basket. But if we just had a standstill four-man that could shoot, it would have just given me so much more space. But it was a fantastic year. And I mean, what are some of your memories about that run?
Yeah, I mean, we won. At one point, we won, I think it was, like you said, 18 games, and we were 13 in the country. And I mean, the fans are everywhere. You're leading the game where I was like, okay, this guy is unbelievable, is when we were playing LSU at home. If you remember that, we played, and they had Big Baby and Brandon Bass, and those guys were really good players, right? I mean, Bass played in the NBA.
I think they were ranked 20. Yeah,
and so was Big Baby, and you just kicked both their butts. I forget what you had that game, but you just dominated those two guys that were supposed to be the best players basically in college basketball, and you just dominated those two guys basically by yourself. And after that, we were rolling. The one hiccup we had was Utah State, and after that Utah State, we had to come to Jesus meeting as a team, and kind of rolled through. And then we had UNLV was our first league game, and we beat them by 20. And then it's just on. We were kind of rolling through at that point. It was an unbelievable year. Played University of Arizona at University of Arizona, where we played. Salim Stoudemire was the guy, Channing Frye, and we had that game too. We were right there. I think we ended up losing by 5 or something like that. But just an incredible year. It was one of the best years for me, just to be part of such a great team. And man, you were Player of the Year. I got to go to the award stuff with you at the Final Four, and I was just around you all the time. So it was a pretty neat deal for me that all these people want to talk to you, and I happen to be right next to you.
Yeah, and you were on the court a little bit too, which was kind of cool. We worked a lot on my free throw shooting and different things with technique and whatnot. And you just spent some time with me after training sometimes, and we put some extra time in with different things. And I remember it was big for you as well to be able to be on the court. I guess Majerus kind of, the only time he let you on the court was when you had to run sprints, and he'd tell us if Cody beats you, you're doing it again. The only time you were allowed on the court. So it was nice. That was kind of your start to being involved with coaching.
Yeah, no, that was awesome for me. Just I got to shoot with you every day before and after practice, and you wanted to do it. And any days that we weren't practicing, I'd meet you at the gym. And I mean, it was a pretty neat deal that we got to have a close bond. I mean, remember we were shooting Coach Giacoletti's the shoot for your license. Yeah. Remember the 3-pointers?
Yeah.
So, Coach Giacoletti had you had to make a total of 35 threes out of 50, and you had to do it 5 times to get your license to be able to shoot threes in games.
Yeah.
And I remember once Coach Giacoletti put that in, you grabbed me right away, and you're like, all right, we're shooting it every day the next 5 days until I get it, however long we're going to do it. And it took us, I think you were the first or second guy to have it done. You had it done right away, though. It got done right away in 5 days.
Contrary to belief. So I try to tell people I used to shoot the 3-ball, but no one believes me. But yeah, it was a tough drill. There was one, I mean, there were a few real good shooters that couldn't do it. It was
some of it was standstill, some of it was movement, and you had to do it all the way through. And it was a pretty tough drill. I mean, and to do 35 out of 50 doesn't sound that hard, but with all the movement, you need a bit of conditioning. We had one kid, Jake Schmidt, who's still a good friend of mine, but he was a bigger kid, a little bit kind of battling with shape at times, and he was a really good shooter, but he'd be 25 for 30, and then those last 20, his legs would just be fried, and he wouldn't get it. He couldn't get it the whole season, and it was a pretty interesting drill.
Yeah, no, I always like that drill, and I do that sometimes with our players right now, just to change it up with different drills. Yeah, it was that one, and then that year, I don't know if you told anybody this, but all these college guys think they have it so hard. You were the player of the year, and before you were the player of the year, you were working at Skybox, which was in downtown Salt Lake City at the mall, and you were what was your job there?
Oh,
you
my
were
God, man. It was first off, it was my fault because I was freshman year. I lived on campus, everything taken care of. Swipe card to the eating area, the meal heritage center where you get all your meals. Don't pay a bill, don't see a bill. And here I was trying to be a hero that sophomore year and thinking moving off campus is a great idea because you get a. I think my check ended up being less than everyone else's because I got taxed for being an international student. So I ended up getting $600 US a month, which then had to cover petrol, insurance, and my rent. My rent was $375, so it left me with $200. So I got I think a month into the preseason, I'm like, holy shit, I have no money. I can't pay my rent. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So I went to, I still remember this. I went to Ray Giacoletti and I'm like, I have no money. I messed up. I moved off campus. I said, I need some money. I need something. I need you to help me out. And he's like, we can't do that. It's illegal. I'm not doing it. I said, can you at least get me a meal pass so I can at least eat at the Heritage Center? So he looked into it for me and he's like, look, that would be illegal because you're living off campus. So I'm like, fuck. So he ends up contacting a booster of ours who ended up being a friend of mine, and he got me a job as a waiter at Skybox. So it's just a basic American sports bar and grill, and it was in the mall. It was a big restaurant, and I was under 21, so I couldn't be a waiter by law in Utah because of alcohol. So I was a food runner. So all they let me do was carry food from once it got cooked, I had to grab the plates, put it on a tray, and help the waitresses take the food to people's tables while they're taking other orders. And it was hell, man. I hated that job. At the start, it was cool. I did Fridays and Saturday nights, 5 till 10 p.m., 5 hours straight on my feet after 2-a-day sessions. I still remember it. And it was pretty cool for the most part at the start. I had a manager, a guy, and then the shifts changed. I got this lady, and she was a bitch to me. She was, the other manager, if it was 9 o'clock and things were dying down, he'd be like, all right, man, just get out of here. Or, what food do you want to take with you? Whereas this chick, it was like, you're staying here till 9:50, 9:59. If there was no one left in the restaurant, she'd be like, go and roll some cutlery, go and roll some utensils and the napkins, go and do this. And I was like, oh man. So I did that for I think I did it for almost 2 months until I built up enough bankroll that would at least get me through to be able to pay my rent. But that was all my fault. I shouldn't have moved off campus. It was just stupid, but I had to kind of work for it. And I guess it made me respect money even to this day.
I just remember going there a couple of times and you hooking me up with some free chips. That was my favorite part about you working at Skybox.
That's all I could get my hands on. But the worst part was, so like you said, I was an All-American. I was all over ESPN. I was touted as the next, at that point, a top 10, top 15 pick mid-season. And I'm working at a damn sports bar. So everyone that comes to the bar wants to talk to me. So I drop off food at someone's table, and they're like, Andrew Bogut? I'm like, yeah. He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I'm working, man. What does it look like I'm doing? And then they want to have a conversation about who you guys got this week or great game last week. And it was kind of cool, but at the same time, it was half embarrassing because I was like, why am I here working at Skybox? And that's my gripe with the NCAA, right? It's like, you're selling my damn jersey in the bookstore, making money off my name, and I'm working in a damn restaurant, just so I can pay my rent, And I remember when we had the meals, the NCAA rules, you guys could feed us after training, after practice sessions. So I remember taking enough food for 3 or 4 days, take all the leftovers and try to have as much food as I could because it was free. But there were the other days where I had to eat. I was eating off the Wendy's dollar menu that was near my house. I mean, a lot of people don't know that, but I had $3 or $4 in my pocket after school driving home, and I'd get 4 cheeseburgers for $1. And this is I think the NCAA has done a bit of a better job now with increasing the grants and trying to look after athletes a little more. But that's what it was like in the 2000s. And it was hard to I couldn't take a girl to the movies. I couldn't do any of that shit. And it was definitely tough.
Those are different days. Now it's a lot easier for these guys. I mean, it's still not where it should be, but it's a lot better than having the best player in the country at that time working at a waiter in the Skybox.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I guess the kind of story from that season was, I mean, the bond that you and I built. You know, we spent a lot of time together. I even spent time with your family when you weren't there at times when I was in Wisconsin, and had kind of no friends or family there at that point, and they'd have me over. But it then gave you, you know, an opportunity to come. I remember getting you into some Bucks practices, and when I was with Milwaukee, you'd come in as a guest coach, so trying to help you out throughout your journey, which pushed you to different coaching jobs and basketball ops jobs. And I guess the kicker is we still remain friends to this day. Yeah, no, it's created a special friendship. It's been awesome. You know, all the things that I've been able to experience, and even down the line, you know, I got to go to some of the Warriors stuff, and I got you to the finals games a couple of times.
Yeah, multiple times, and some of the best experiences of my life, and it's been pretty neat, and I do appreciate all that stuff.
I guess I'll leave you with this. I mean, what's your fondest memory of that year with Ray Giacoletti? I mean, obviously we won a lot of games and all that fun stuff, but give me something that you can remember. I'll put you under the pump here a little bit that probably you still think about to this day.
For that year, probably my favorite memory was beating UTEP to go to the Sweet 16. Oh no, sorry, Oklahoma. We beat UTEP first and then beat Oklahoma, just because we were the 6 and they were the 3. And
Calvin Sampson, who funnily enough, small world, ended up being an assistant coach with me in Milwaukee one year. But they were tough. They had that big kid Taj Gibson, and it was a Kevin Bookout, was it maybe? Big football player.
Yeah, a couple really good guards. Yep. But that was probably just my favorite memory of that year, is just kind of celebrating. And we were in Tucson, and I was just it was just an unbelievable experience winning those 2 games and then going to the Sweet 16. And when we get to the Sweet 16, there's Kentucky, and I think Michigan State was playing somebody. Michigan State was playing, I forget who they were playing before that, but it was just an incredible experience. And like you said, if Jayhawk could have made a couple more threes, I think it would have been a different story that game, because that Kentucky team was really good. They had Rondo, Azubuike.
They had 3 7-footers. I don't know if you remember, they had 3 7-footers they threw at me in split minutes, so they just wore me. I still ended up with 20 and 12, but I didn't feel like I played well. I missed some free throws. I just didn't play that well. But they had that big kid from Africa that was like 7'4" that they played for spot minutes. They had a big Polish kid, and then they had Randolph Morris and Chuck Hayes, and they did a great job of just throwing different people at me that played me differently, and I never really got in a good rhythm. And I guess we were right there too the whole game, which was crazy. You know, we were 5, 6, 7 points, but we just couldn't get it down to even or the lead, and that's why they're Kentucky and they get the best kids every year.
Yep, they threw out 3 7-footers and they used all 15 fouls on you.
Yeah,
that was pretty neat. And our last home game is when I realized how special it was. As probably our last home game. You know, it was my 3rd year at Utah, and just really getting to know college basketball at that point was just, you know, when we were doing kind of it was senior night, and they were doing senior night for Mark Jackson and I forget who else, but we were kind of celebrating you that day too. And I was just looking at a couple, you know, I looked at Coach Jack and a couple of the other assistant coaches. They kind of had tears in their eyes during that pregame, and that was another point where I was like, man, this just doesn't happen every day where you're at and at the University of Utah, and just that was another kind of, you know, I just remember that to this day. Like, man, that was just a really special year, and to be around the best player in the country at that point, that was the best part about it.
Yeah, and I got lucky because they I had my dad come out, and that was senior night, but they also honored me knowing that I wasn't coming back. I mean, they weren't silly. It would be crazy to stay on for another year and risk injury or whatever if I could go top 10. But I remember they did, you know, Ray Giacoletti and a few other coaches and people within the University of Utah. They even retired my jersey about it, you know, 4 or 5 months later. that following season, which generally is not supposed to happen unless you graduate. And I obviously didn't graduate because I only spent 2 years there. So they did a lot of fantastic things, which you were obviously a part of. So it was a very special time, a much simpler time. I think we'd all agree it was an awesome time to be part of all that when with guys that I guess you kind of will remember for the rest of your life. But we will wrap it up there. Thanks, Cody, for spending some time with us. I think that people really appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck with your journey and from what I understand, the future head coach.
That's the plan. That's what I'm working towards, and hopefully I get a chance to coach a couple guys like you, man.
That'd be nice. All right, man. Thanks.
All right, brother.
So once again, a very special thank you to Cody Fueger, assistant coach of the BYU men's basketball program as of current. Hopefully he will be a head coach one day. We can all celebrate his success down the track. So I'll be watching closely. I still remain good friends with him, as I mentioned. So we'll see how that goes. But thanks again to Cody. Moving on now, the feature interview on this episode 6, is former head coach of the University of Utah, Ray Giacoletti. Very integral part of kind of where my career kind of ascended and everything kind of came together. So when he initially got the job, I had no idea who he was. Didn't even really know much about the school he was from. He was from the University of Eastern Washington. They had a school record year under Coach Giacoletti. They were a Cinderella story. They played very, very well. I think they definitely overachieved and gone from a small school like that. He ended up getting the head coaching gig at the University of Utah. So he was going into newfound land as well. And I was in a part of my career where I didn't know if I was going to come back for my sophomore year. I kind of felt like my freshman year was an up and down, and it was beyond a grind at times. And look, I understand you have to have setbacks and speed bumps and adversity, but the adversity faced from a guy like Rick Majerus was probably more than any 19, 20-year-old should face at times. It did make me tougher, made us all tougher, but it wasn't even necessarily stuff just directed at me. It was probably just seeing the treatment of some, teammates and coaches and training staff. It gets to you mentally, and it was not an enjoyable year. It was a very, very hard year. Learned a lot about basketball. Like I said on episode 4, he was one of the smartest coaches I've ever played for, but the human element and that toll that it took was toxic at times, and that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth about going back and essentially doing that for no money. I was 19, 20 and being offered multi-million-dollar deals to go over to Europe. I was on draft boards after my freshman year, late first round pick projected, first round. So I was at a crossroad again. What do? Do I go back? A fresh head coach that's going to tell me what I want to hear when he pitches me coming back. And then we all know once you get there, you're there. There's no reneging on what you agreed to. So that was in the back of my mind. I felt like a lot of college coaches the recruiting process felt like you were being sold a car from a car dealer. It felt like that. They tell you everything you want to hear, and and that's probably wrong in a way, because there is some adversity you're going to face along the way, but they're recruiting you, so they don't want to tell you that. So Ray Giacoletti flew out to see my parents, which was discussed on episode 4. I was in national team camp, so I wasn't there. He made sure that they were good. My dad loved him. Big difference, breath of fresh air from like a Rick Majerus. And then he actually flew to Athens, Greece, while I was in the middle of an Olympic campaign. And I caught up with him for a meal or two and gave him my word that I'd be back, and basically just put on the table like, hey, I don't want to be, sold a lemon again. And I've got some gripes about that. And I don't know if I'm going to stay beyond this year. And he said, look, you come back for a year and the rest will take care of itself. I'm not trying to keep you here longer than you should be, and vice versa. If you can go to the NBA after your second year, by all means, and we'll support whatever you do. So he was true to that word. So we'll discuss a bit of that in the interview. He, somewhat re-recruited me. But it was, we had to build a fresh and new relationship, which there were growing pains, as we'll discuss in detail. There were turning points. But at the end of the day, he was a guy that gave me some freedom, and allowed me to play freely, both from a basketball point of view and mentally. There was obviously a consequence for mistakes that were made over and over, but he let you play to the point where you're going to make a mistake every now and then, and that just opened up my game immensely. I really got to do a whole lot of different things out there, and had one of the best years of my life, basketball-wise, statistically, and team-wise. So we'll get into all that and more. So without further ado, please welcome Ray Giacoletti.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome a special guest, a former
coach of mine, the head coach at the University of Utah, Ray Giacoletti. I'll read through his long resume. He's almost as long as mine. Real quick, he started at Minot State in the early 80s, followed that by being a grad assistant there for a year, went on to Western Illinois as a grad assistant after that in the mid 80s, followed by Oral Roberts as an assistant coach, the Fresno Flames as an assistant coach, early 90s Illinois State as an assistant coach, then was at the University of Washington as an assistant in the mid 90s, then went over to North Dakota State, coached there, head coach in the early 2000s, was at the University of Eastern Washington as a head coach, and then I ran into Coach Jack at the University of Utah in 2004 when he took over for Rick Majerus. He was there for 3 years, then went to Gonzaga as a head assistant for Mark Few in Gonzaga, and then head coaching position at Drake in 2013 to 2016, and then presently at the University of St. Louis as an assistant coach. So welcome to the show, Coach. It's a pretty hefty resume. You got 40 years in college basketball.
All that means is I'm old, Bogues. Great to hear from you, and I'm looking forward to catching up.
Yeah, appreciate you coming. I mean, obviously an integral part of kind of getting me to where I am today, essentially a big cog in that whole wheel. And I guess we'll start off by when did you first hear about me and my name and my basketball kind of prowess?
You know, what's funny with that is when you had sent me these notes and I was kind of jotting some notes down, when we were on the road, my last year at Eastern Washington, and Big Monday was a big deal on ESPN at that time. And I remember distinctively several times watching Utah play your freshman year while we were on the road, playing someplace or getting ready to play someplace. And so I bet I had a chance to watch you at least twice, if not 3 times, not having any idea a year from then, have a chance to work with you. But I bet I saw you play 3 or 4 times your freshman year at Utah. Yeah,
which then I guess leads into we obviously were transitioning from Rick Majerus. He had resigned mid my freshman year. Coach Kerry Rupp took over, and a lot of people thought that he was kind of the favorite to take over, but the university made a kind of a good decision, I guess, to kind of distance themselves away from that whole last 20 years of coaching the success and kind of start fresh. And I guess your name came up as one of the interviewees, and you did really well and got the head coaching job. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't really know much about you, and not many of our guys did. But your first order of business was to fly to Australia and almost re-recruit me, which it was no secret that I wasn't entirely happy with my freshman year in college. I had an okay year numbers-wise, but it was a bit of a struggle. But just talk about that. I mean, it's kind of a quirky thing and probably not done that often.
Yeah, I just remember, obviously, what could we do to try to build a relationship and trust with you and your family? And literally, a few days after the press conference, I was longer in the air both ways than I was on the ground to have a chance to meet your mom and dad and just to try to build trust that you would trust me and that I'd have to be a fool if not we were, not to highlight you in every way, shape, or form, offensively, defensively, whatever we were doing. I had seen enough of you and had watched then some tape once I'd gotten the job to know that you had a chance to be very special. And so just to try to do our best job and be upfront and honest as we could. And your parents were amazing. And we were lucky enough to be able to get you stayed for your sophomore year.
Yeah, look, from my point of view, it was a huge gesture just to be able, get the job and then be on a plane pretty much the next day. You didn't even go to campus to settle in and flew, like you said. I mean, it was you were in town for a day and a half, 2 days, and spent more time in the air. Was that your decision? Was the school in your ear a little bit about it, or did you just figure it needed to be done?
No, I thought it needed to be done, and it was funny, Bogues. I remember. Because it was literally, you had no time to prepay a ticket or anything like that, get a ticket in advance. And I remember it was like $8,000. And I remember thinking that would have been half our recruiting budget at Eastern Washington. And so I was like running around trying to find Chris Hill for him to okay it. And when I finally got a hold of him, he just started laughing. He's like, I think that would be money well spent. Money's not an object here. So I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there's no way they're going to let me do this for $8,000. He was excited that I was going to go down there and have a chance to meet your mom and dad.
Yeah, it was a huge step. Don't get me wrong, but I guess the big change for myself and even the team was to go from a Majerus to yourself. You played you had a pretty regimented style and a structure that was, pretty obvious. But I feel like you allowed mistakes as long as they were corrected and we tried to better them. I guess for you as a head coach coming into coach a team that had a lot of players that were kind of had that Majerus kind of, I guess, lack of confidence at times ingrained in them. How did you see that challenge? And was it noticeable that some of the guys just wouldn't get out of their shell? I mean, a guy like Jonas Longvide was a prime example. He was a kid that really got into his shell because he was almost broken the year before. And did you see that as a challenge, both for myself and the team?
It's funny you say that because I wasn't around and was brand new. I was just trying to pick up the pieces the best we could. And going back the last 2 years at Eastern Washington, we tried to play a different style because we had to go play 5 guarantee games a year. And this is a long story, but I'll get back to answer your question. And so I went and met with the people about learning to run the Princeton offense at the time. And that was different for us. And it helped us get over the hump at Eastern Washington and helped us go win some guarantee games those last 2 years. But when I got to Utah, I guess I thought we needed to try to do something different. When I started watching tape of the team, I thought then what we had been doing the last 2 years would fit you perfectly. And the thing that I most remember is you were maybe the best passing big man I've ever been around. And what other people would probably thought initially being crazy playing at the high post, it evolved into something pretty unique and special. And the other piece of it was to be able to get you from the high post to the low post at different times in the shot clock to where teams couldn't beat the heck out of you, as I saw on tape from your freshman year. When you would run to the block, you would just get mauled down there. But trying to get you there maybe in the last 15 or 10 seconds of the shot clock, and you were such a good passer out of double teams that you just thrived in it. And the rest of the guys, Mark Jackson was a huge piece of that. And you massive, will attest to it also. I mean, once we got you back and got Mark back, we had 2 guys that were bought into winning and wasn't about their numbers. I mean, one of the other, and I'm going off track here a little bit, but you and Mark had a challenge. You had each taken like 23, 24 charges apiece at one point in that season. And those were the little things. I tell that story all the time. It's like, if the best player in college basketball can go take 25 charges in a season or lead the country in rebounding, do you not think you could do those same things? And you 2 guys made that year because there were some other things that went on behind the scenes that maybe even you weren't even aware of, or maybe you were. But, I knew some of the other guys, just tried to build them up as best we could. But if you remember right, we didn't have anybody at the 4 spot that could knock down a 3. So what would happen is in transition or whatever we'd be doing, the guy guarding the 4 would just go down and sit on top of you, and then your man would play behind you. So we had to try to find creative ways, and each guy was different. But as long as we had you and Mark controlling that locker room and making sure everybody was on the same page, Randy Ray and I tried to do the best we could with outside the locker room and trying to figure out, how to best utilize you.
Yeah, and just for some context, Mark Jackson he played for Rick Majerus, I think 2 seasons prior. So my freshman year, he had quit playing basketball essentially and just went back to work for his family, and then took my freshman year off completely. And then he had 1 year left of eligibility, and that was what you're referring to. That was almost a re-recruiting process for yourself. And he was, I believe he could have been an NBA player if he really wanted to. He had that toughness. He could shoot the ball. He was a hustle guy, but I think he was happy with just going back to normal life after college.
Yeah, I just remember, I think you two guys really understanding that, hey, this would be the last time, it was Mark's last year, one way or the other, and he made the most of it. And it was going to be, your last opportunity in college. And just you guys did whatever it was going to take for the team to be successful. I think as I look back on that, Bryant Markson was another guy I thought that really bought in. Tim Drisdom really bought in and trying to accomplish the best things it possibly could and sacrifice for each other. But there was some other things going on behind the scenes that you would think with the season we had, everybody would be happy, but it's just a kind of life. That's the way it is. But it was a special year, needless to say.
So do you think, regarding that year, do you think we as a team, or even myself individually, do you think we would have had a year that we had? Like when you first got the job, looked at the roster, maybe, I don't know, a month into individual sessions with the NCAA rules before the actual season training camp started. Did you think we'd be that good?
I didn't know. I was just trying to do the best we could. Our staff was just trying to do find a way to help you be the best you could, which was really easy. We could screw up a lot of things. I bet Randy Ray and I said 20 times on that bench that year, we would screw things up maybe for 30 seconds on the shot clock, and somebody would throw it to you at 5 left on the shot clock, and you either score it or throw a dime to a guy for a layup, and we'd look at each other and go, we had nothing to do with that. That was just a great play by a great player. But you could tell that we had the pieces, and it just took a while to gel. I mean, I remember the Y in the road early on at Logan, getting beat by 25 early in the season, maybe 3 or 4 games into it. And that was a pretty good indication, the kind of job that you and Mark did keeping the team together, because after getting beat by 25 on the road, it could have went the other way, but it didn't. And I think we went on to rattle off 18 in a row after that.
Yeah, we did. I remember that. That was at Utah State, I believe, on the road. And I guess, look, I definitely, it was the first time I was kind of played in the high post at any point in my career. And I think it was a perfect fit for me to see the floor and kind of be facing the basket, especially with, like you mentioned, the Princeton offense for me was a godsend to an extent, because there was just constant back cutting and slips, and I could see all that and throw those passes. But another quirky thing we used to do was we used to double a lot in the post, and it was generally whoever I was guarding or whoever the foreman was guarding. We just do random doubles on post players. And at one point I was like, man, am I a bad defender? What's going on here? But looking back, I guess it kept me in the game minutes wise, because it kept me out of foul trouble. And I think that was, probably a conscious decision by yourself and the coaching staff to, we know Bogues can guard in the post to an extent, but we can't afford to have him pick up 2 or 3 fouls early. And looking back, it was kind of genius.
Yeah, there was 2 things we wanted to do, and one of them, I remember you were always great, because we could say whatever we wanted to say to each other, and it was never going to be in front of other people. But one of them was, I remember the day I asked you, you led the league your freshman year in block shots. And I said, you can't do that every possession, try to go block the shot. We got to have you on the floor 38 minutes. And the other piece was, if we help with double teams, again, just to try to keep you out of foul trouble, it wasn't for any other reason other than we had to find a way to keep you on the floor 38 minutes. And you bought into the charge deal. I said, you still block shots, but if you mix it up a little bit, and you bought into it, I'll give you that now. And you still were a really good shot blocker, but I think you had people so confused. And you carried it out throughout the rest of your career, which you'll never know. Wherever I was sitting during your NBA career and would see you take a charge in an NBA game, a smile would come across my face. Like, again, if it's good enough for the best player in college basketball, it should be good enough for everybody.
And what's funny about that is I was labeled as a defensive bust and defensive liability coming out of college. So I end up making an all-defensive team later in my career. So it just goes to show sometimes even the scouts can get it wrong.
Yeah, just, again, going back and just trusting each other. And that's what I appreciate about you. I was very blessed to have coached you for the year, and it seemed to work. It was timing in life is everything, and the timing was perfect for that because you took us on a heck of a ride.
Yeah, and look, we'll get to a bit of a negative. It wasn't all rosy between you and I. We did have one massive blow up, which I think was a turning point, at least for myself and probably you as well. But we had a big Australian kid called Luke Neville, 7-footer, and he was uber talented. He just didn't really have the work ethic and drive on a daily basis. But the thing with Luke was 1 out of maybe 10 sessions, he would be one of the best players on the court, but the other 9, he'd be almost the worst. So I remember we had a training session. I still remember up at the Hyper Gym, which was the student courts. So we kind of booked that out because we couldn't be on the Huntsman because we got kicked off or whatever happened. And I remember Luke Neville was just kicking my ass that day. Everything I did, he just hitting fadeaways, hooks. So I believe we had a no front rule on the post. We didn't like fronting the post and getting out of position and giving angles. So I started getting frustrated with Luke. So I'm like, nah, I'm going to try to front him and just not let him catch. So you blew your whistle and you said, Bogues, we don't front here, play solid defense behind and blah, 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 blah. So I did that. And then he scored again. So I've looked at you and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is starting to piss me off. So then next play down, I go to front again. You blow your whistle and you're like, Bogues, we don't do that. And we went back and forth at each other and it was heated and it was emotional. And I guess it was a bit of a disagreement in philosophy. And I felt like, I need to get the ball out of his hands. He's killing me. And I think it was more the fact that Luke Neville was just killing me and I was frustrated, and you booted me out of practice. You kicked me out of practice and said, get out of here. That was probably a turning point for our relationship. David Bauman, my agent, who was my agent at the time, but was kind of helping me through. He helped a lot through that because I basically caught him trying to have a cry about it. And he basically told me, harden the F up and shut up. Like, it's your college coach. You need to go back there and buy in and respect what he's doing. And even if you were to leave, where are you going to go? So he worked me up, and I guess, do you remember that? Do you remember that story, and do I have it correctly?
You have it correctly. And I had kind of a why in the road that day also, because I either had to, if I would have let you get by with that day, I'd have got walked on by 12 other guys. And so I kind of had to make a quick decision. And I tell you, it had me worried for 24 hours though, because we didn't communicate for 24 hours and, was kind of uncertain of what was going to take place. And you're right. After that, your and I's relationship was amazing after that. But, I think you were probably, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but, you're going to test the new guy. And I had 12 or 13 other guys going to watch what I was going to do, and which was going to dictate, if I could coach them hard. It just was one of those situations, and thank God it all worked out. And we were both probably testing each other a little bit.
Yeah, and I think these days that gets lost. I think we had our blow up, we had our back and forth, and it got real chirpy, and we both said things we probably regret. But I think that's a testament of a good team, a good player-player relationship, a good player-coach relationship. You're going to have those blow ups, whether it's in the NBA or college or whatever environment you're in, when you're around elite people. And I think the most important thing is from those is that you go away, you take your time, your day or two, you catch your breath, and then you move on and you correct those mistakes of that happening and you get on with it. And I think that relationship then grows to another level. And I think we've kind of, you'd see it coaching in college basketball. We've got lost with that, where you can't even have that blow up anymore because parents will get involved or an old AAU coach will get involved. And I think it's just it's kind of a blow to raising kids the right way, because you have to have those, I believe, as bad as they were at the time and as bad as they felt. I think they build your relationship tenfold instead of onefold. Would you agree?
I agree 100%. What we're teaching kids today, in my opinion, is how to quit. And not only how to quit once, but how to quit 2 or 3 different times. These new transfer rules are ridiculous. This year, you could transfer it the semester and go to another place. And if you hadn't played that first semester, you could play the second semester at the other school. And you're like, what are we doing? Have a little toughness here and fight through something. If we quit now, we're going to quit 100 more times in your lifetime. I always got along with guys that, that ran hot, that had that fire burning. And you certainly, we had our little confrontation, and I don't think we had another one, to be quite honest with you. I can remember, but I would rather have that than a guy you're constantly prodding to try to get to work hard. Or I don't know how it is in Australia today, but in America, all we're doing is teaching the next generation on how to quit, not once, but 3 or 4 different times.
Yeah, I would agree totally. I think those lessons that I learned not only through college, but even my junior career, the adversity, that's what makes you, and that's what makes you into a professional, because once you get to the professional level, you're going to face much more of it. And if you can handle that accordingly, and you still have your blow-ups and you still go back and forth with rival players, even players in your team, trainings, sometimes there's punches thrown, but the next day you got to forget about it and move on. And that's something that you can then carry with you as a building block for culture. But yeah, I would totally agree. It's definitely changed. It makes coaching very hard, and it is easy to just go to the other school that recruited you or the next high school, the AAU team, and I think it's setting a bad precedent. But we'll move on from that. Do you remember when I came to you and basically asked for money?
When I was reading those notes, I don't. But as I read through it, I kind of remember, and it's a story that I wish I would have used more over the years. Not the fact that you came for money, but what you did after that. Think about, it wasn't that long ago. We're talking about 16 years ago, to where the top player in college basketball was going to go work in a sports bar Friday and Saturday night to make a few extra bucks before the season started. You talk about a work ethic and understanding who you are, and that would never happen today. Never. It's all about, gimme, need more. But those are, again, mom and dad did an amazing job in instilling a work ethic into you. And I reflected a lot on that today, reading when you that segment of the notes you sent me, and it's like I didn't really remember it, but it started coming back to me. I told a couple people about it today. It's like, can you ever believe the best player in college basketball 4 months, 5 months before that would be working at a sports bar on Friday and Saturday night and have no issues or no problems, did his job, kept his mouth shut. I think that's why one of the reasons I think not only your play on the court, but why you're so special in Salt Lake City, because you have a work ethic. You were among the people. Yeah. So yes, I didn't remember it, but it started coming back to me a little bit today.
Well, yeah, I remember it clearly. And I basically came to the office. It was my fault. I moved off campus that sophomore year and thought getting a check would be much better than living on campus, which was the dumbest decision I made. But then I come to realize, how am I going to pay for food? How am I going to pay for petrol or gasoline for my car, and then rent on top of that? So I came to you and said, I need some help. And you said, hell no, we can't do that. We're not doing that. And then my follow-up was, well, can you try to get me a meal card on campus? You tried, but then that was deemed illegal by NCAA standards. So the third best option was, I can try to find you a job. And I'm like, yep, done. Let's just do that. I tried the first two. They didn't work. And like you said, I worked at Skybox, which was downtown. And the funny thing I spoke about Cody with it as well was that it was a sports bar, so everyone kind of knew who I was, and I was running out food at tables 5 hours on a Friday and 5 hours on a Saturday. But it got me over the hump. I got paid pretty well for it, and it made me bank up enough money in the account to then get me through the season so I could pay my rent. But definitely a great part of my kind of life. It didn't make me kind of have the NCAA on my Christmas card list, I can tell you that, because back then, I think it's changed now. I think the grants are a little bit more, so at least the kid can go out to the movies with his girlfriend and whatnot. But boy, back in the 90s and the 2000s, the NCAA, it was tough. It was really, really tough to get by, especially as an international student. But that's changed a lot today.
Yeah, it was tough. I agree 100%. And you would be shocked today if you knew what all's going on. It's called cost of living, and at most places, it's a minimum of $5,000 a year. So just think about each semester getting a check for $2,500. That's before the American kids could throw Pell on there. So, and now the next step's going to be this image likeness, it could go crazy here in the future. But, you weren't trying to do anything that the normal college kid, just have a few extra bucks in your pocket. And, but there just would be very, very few people that would ever went and done that. And I just astonished. And the people I told the story to today, they were like, what now? One was one of the other assistants here at SLU, who, by the way, we actually, he played college basketball at Missouri, but that's a whole nother different story. But he was a really good player. And he was like, okay, you're telling me Andrew Bogut, 4 months before he became the Naismith winner, worked Friday and Saturday night at a sports bar? I said, yeah. And he said, it wasn't just BS. I said, no, he worked. We went down there several different times, Kim and I, and to check on him or have dinner or whatever. And it's like, no, he worked. It was all legit. There was no, hey, yeah, you're doing this. You can sit in the back or go, not show up or anything like that. No, you worked. And amazing story. I'm glad you refreshed my memory of it today.
Yeah, it was tough. I had a manager, a lady that I don't know what her deal was. She was the older single lady, so she hated the world. She was on me. She was, even when there was no customers in, it was go cut some lemons, or it was go cut. You
told me that now.
Oh man, there were days where I was like, I was close. Some days I was like, man, like this is tough. Like I'm really, and then on top of that, I still did it for a couple of weeks leading into training camp. When we had the tour days, I still did it right until we had our first game, and then I obviously couldn't do it anymore. But no, it was good. It was a great part of my journey, and it's a great story. But moving back to basketball, we go 29-6 overall, 13-1 in conference with a Mountain West Conference regular season champs. We finished second in the tournament, the Mountain West Conference tournament. New Mexico was kind of our rivals and had Danny Granger, and they were a very well coached team at the time as well. But we ended up going to the Sweet 16, 18-game winning streak. At one point, I think we led the nation, and it was just a real enjoyable year for me, as it kind of set the scene for everything beyond that for me. But I really, looking back, I think the AIS and the University of Utah were probably my most enjoyable memories from playing basketball. The NBA is a whole different thing because you're making money, and it's not as I don't think it's as pure as what college basketball was back then and the AIS. But I guess, was that your best season as a head coach or an assistant coach or a coach in general? And not just because of wins and losses, just because of kind of everything we went through as a team.
There were two, Andrew. That was certainly one of the two. The year before that, at Eastern Washington, we took the school to its first ever NCAA tournament. So that was pretty unique also. But I mean, it's 1A, 1B. They're the top two in my career. And that whole thing was a blur to me. I don't know how it was for you, but it's a blur. And I hate to use the word but I just remember literally we got beat in Kansas City by Oklahoma State. And right after the game, the Utah people had called and wanted me to fly right from Kansas City to meet with them. I said, I'm not going to do that. I flew home to Spokane with our team, went and changed clothes, flew to Salt Lake, met with Chris Hill, and 3 or 4 days later, did the press conference. 3 or 4 days later than that, went and met with your mom and dad in Australia, and literally did not have a break. And I was burnt. I was done at the end of that year. It was, looking back, like, maybe the best year of my career being a part of something like that. But the fatigue I felt and just being burnt and needing a break, it's been a long time since I felt that way. But the pride and looking back on it, and so many great memories. Yeah, it's amazing when you stop and think about it. Were you tired?
Nah. I mean, I wish I had that all throughout my career. I don't know what I had bottled up, but it was kind of always the next thing. I mean, if you remember, I came from the Olympics before you got the job. I was at the Olympics, and then you got the job. So I had a whole off season to play against grown men, and I felt like I came back even better because of that. I've been quoted as saying I felt like I was coming back to my sophomore year to play against boys again, and I felt like a man. So I wasn't, funnily enough, I didn't really have a vacation, and once we were done with the Sweet 16, I went and started preparing for the draft. But it definitely was a really kind of quick part of my journey, but one that it can be blurry at times. And that's why I guess getting people like yourself on, and for me to even relive and reminisce about those times, I think it's just cool to hear these stories. And I hear very similar things from numerous guests I get on of, I don't remember that, but it was so cool to talk about it. And I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day, especially for yourself now. You're becoming, an older fella. So that's all you'll probably have to hang on to once you retire and you're having beers on the beach is those memories.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I mean, you just brought something else up. I went to Athens with you for 5 or 6 days.
That's right.
You remember that?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I do remember that actually. Yep.
I sat down every night at the bar with your dad, and we had a nightcap to end the night. And I mean, what's the chances? You talk about fate and timing of all the hotels in Athens. I stayed at the same hotel your mom and dad, and we didn't set it up. It just happened that way. I mean, I came over because we got by the NBA thing that you were going to come back, but I thought the European teams may try to mess with you, which I'm sure they did over there.
Yep.
While you were playing in the Olympics. And so I went over for like 5 days, and your dad and I really got to be buddies during that time. And it was, just again, to try to support you in any way I could. But another, opportunity where I would never have a chance to do something like that, go to the Olympics. And so when you just mentioned that, I was like, I'd forgotten I even gone over there. But your dad and I got well acquainted. Awesome man. Yeah,
that was definitely interesting. It was, and you're right. Even before my freshman year, and then between my freshman and sophomore year, I was getting offers to go over to Europe. So, as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, without even barely having any coins in my pocket, it was hard to turn down. But I was always kind of the belief that even for my freshman year, I gave my word to Rick Majerus, and then I gave my word to you that I'll be back, and that kind of meant more than the money at that point. And I kind of knew the money would come down the track if I ticked all the boxes. So, moving on from, I guess we get knocked out in the Sweet 16, I kind of take off and start preparing for the draft. What do you remember about coming out for draft night? I made a specific point of having yourself and Kim, your wife, to come out and be there and be part of that whole process, which was new to me, but I wanted to make sure. I think I could only get, it was 8 people on my table. 2 were definitely for yourself and your wife, and then it was myself, my mom, my dad, and I think 2 agents. So do you remember that night?
Oh my God, yeah. As I sit here in my office on the hill in St. Louis, which is the Italian district in St. Louis, I look over. Right up on the wall is the green room draft badge that's draped across your Naismith jacket you gave me and signed for me. So yeah, one of the special nights. Again, when would most coaches ever have a chance to do something like that? And maybe one of the kindest gestures a player or somebody in basketball has ever done to my wife and I. We had a ball and an interesting night. I mean, you and I made the circuit. I don't know if you remember this, but made the circuit to Atlanta for the Naismith, then flew to Los Angeles for the Wooden, then flew back to Atlanta to meet with the Hawks. The guy I worked for 8 years, Bob Bender, was an assistant with them. But do you remember that after the month after the season got done?
Yeah, and then the Final Four.
And then went to the Final Four. That's right.
Yeah, for all the awards. But it's a good thing when you're flying around collecting trophies. Definitely a good thing.
That was amazing time. Again, you only have one opportunity to do it, but for me to have a chance to go through that with you and have a small part was absolutely amazing. I got one other thing for you. Do you remember? And we can talk about this being this, 16, 17 years ago, after you made your visits, and I think I went to Atlanta. I don't think I went anyplace else with you, but maybe the Monday before the draft, got to the office, and the top 3 teams, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Was Sacramento the third one, had the third pick? I can't remember who it was now.
New
Orleans. They all had these emergency messages. And my cell phone, for whatever reason, I had off, and Coach Bender had left like 4 messages like, why didn't you tell us he had a degenerative eye disease? I'm like,
oh, man.
And so I call Coach Bender back first. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, somebody has leaked that Andrew has degenerative eye disease. I'm like, I've known him for 9 months. I know he wears a contact in one eye. I've never heard of this. Let me go get our trainer. I said, do you remember that though? I mean, it
yeah, I do remember.
Buzz. Like,
I have it on my notes to talk about my sophomore year, and it was, Rick Majerus, to put it bluntly, basically put out that I was going to be blind within 3 or 4 years. Because I have an issue called keratoconus, which just means that my corneas aren't completely round. They're a bit more kind of oval, and it can be degenerative if it progressively gets worse every year, but mine's been stable for 10, 15 years. So yeah, he left me a nice little gift going into the draft. So then I had to, wherever I had my draft workouts, which was only Atlanta and Milwaukee, they sent me to an optometrist, an eye specialist, and those sessions were longer than my workout with the team. So they did every scan possible on my eye. So people literally thought I was going to go blind. That wasn't
Wow.
too good. It caused me some issues. We actually got to a point where we had a cease and desist letter drafted. My agent did. He was fuming at the time. And I mean, there were theories around why he did it. One was he was Deron Williams' personal trainer leading into the draft. And the other was that he didn't want me to go as high as Keith Van Horn in the draft, which was, I think Keith went number 2.
I would go with that one, that Van Horn went 2 and he didn't want you to go 1.
Which is kind of petty, because he was part of my journey. I mean, whether our relationship wasn't good or not, he was part of it and should be proud of it. But that's funny, because I will hit that hard in the pod outside of this Q&A, because it was a really tough time, especially for a 19, 20-year-old dealing with that. You're like, man, what the hell's going on? Like, I was, anyway, but I guess the reason why I wanted you around that draft process especially was because, most college coaches, to put it bluntly, a lot of college coaches, to put it bluntly, I got the used car salesman feel from a lot. I'm not saying all, but there's a lot that will, lie to your face. They'll then over-recruit you. They'll then do X, Y, Z. But I guess you could have kind of tried to play hardball to an extent where, to try and get me back for the junior year by there's coaches that have been, I mean, Rick Majerus was one that would do it, and that would try to, say you weren't that good in the media, you need another year in college, and because they're trying to save their job for that following year, or trying to save having the best player come back, right? And you were always on record about, if Andrew has a chance to be drafted, we need to support that as best we can. And that was really rare at the time. So I guess this is a forum to thank you for that, and the thank you was to bring you to that draft process. But that was kind of my mindset with all that.
You were very kind. It was one of the highlights for even not only for me to be there, but my wife to be there to enjoy it also. It's funny, whenever we go to New York again, not often, but we always bring that up, and the 4 or 5 nights, or whatever it was, 3 or 4 nights in New York during that time were really special, and to be in the green room and to be with your family, and yeah, it was just an amazing experience, and one that never got a chance to do again. So yeah, thank you for that.
No worries. And I guess the final thing, Utah basketball wise, you went to bat for me to have my jersey retired the following season. I was in the NBA as a rookie, and I believe it was over All-Star Weekend, so I had to go to All-Star Weekend in Houston to play in the rookie-sophomore game. But you had basically pushed the school to retire my jersey, which for everyone listening, it doesn't happen very often that a 2-year player has their jersey retired. Most schools have a rule where you need to be there for 4 years and graduate. So talk about that. I mean, I guess you went to bat for me, and I assume it was a wrestle probably with admin at times to get that over the line, but you managed to do it.
I think it was pretty easy, Bogue. I mean, if people couldn't see that you had done something, it was the second best year in school history. Think about the history of Utah basketball. You led us to the second best year in school history. So that was pretty easy, and I think everybody was pretty much on board. I don't remember a whole lot about having to twist too many arms. That was that needed to be done. That was something that worked out perfect with the All-Star break with you, and And quite frankly, you were so well respected in Salt Lake that it was the people needed to honor you because, you go back to how that season ended. It's warp speed until you lose the game. And it's just like, boom, like it's hitting a wall. It's done, over. There's no more.
Yep.
You win, you get done with the conference, you go to Vegas for the conference tournament, go to the championship game, and then right away, who you play, selection Sunday, who do you play? We're going to El Paso, or we're going to Tucson to play UTEP. You get lucky and win there, and then you got Oklahoma, and then you get lucky in there, win there, and then all of a sudden you're right back. Okay, we got Kentucky in Austin. What do we got to do? It's just a blur, and so nobody really properly had a chance to thank you or for you to kind of step in the public eye and thank them, so it was just the right thing to do. And I'm so glad the school did it. And I don't remember having to twist too many arms.
Oh, that's good. Well, the number 4 is hanging up there forever. So that's nice. As we finish, is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners about yourself or us or the journey or whatever you got for us?
For me, as I look back, it was just, I feel really blessed. Not too many guys, again, get a chance to coach the best player in college basketball. And I feel very fortunate. And you'll never know over the course of your NBA career how many times I was either sitting in a hotel room or at dinner at a bar and watching you, and the pride I felt with that. And I can speak for the rest of that coaching staff also. And it's just fun to have watched your career and you grow from a young man to a man. And you did it with such grace. I mean, think about your journey and all the way to winning a world championship with the Warriors. So thank you. And it's been fun to be a small part of it. But I had just as much fun in the 15, 16 years after that, watching you from afar and just, the pride we all had in you, the type of person and your work ethic and player. So those were special times. And the other piece I think is if we could help somehow guys to get back to the old school, thought process of putting a plan together and having a work ethic, we've lost that somewhere along the way. And I can go back. You were obviously one of them. And I bet I told Kelly Olynyk 20 different Andrew Bogut stories during the time I was with him at Gonzaga. And he did it then finally. I mean, because of a small part of it is me telling stories about you. He redshirted in between his sophomore and junior year, put a plan together and followed through and became, our 4th big to literally in a year becoming the 14th player taken in the draft, still playing today in the NBA. So I don't think, you would have no reason to know some of those things, but your legacy kind of rubs off on other people. And if people could go back to old school morals and values and work ethics, sure would be a whole heck of a lot easier out there than kind of what it's come to today.
Yeah, I think they still exist. They just aren't the loudest voices anymore. And that's, I guess, people like yourself and I and people that think that way just need to continue to not be afraid to voice those opinions, I believe. I think there's no better way than having to face adversity. If you're a kid that as soon as you fall over, your parents run over and pick you up and basically are shedding tears for you your whole childhood, and you're bubble wrapping kids, you're not gonna survive in the real world. You go for a job interview, you're not gonna get the job every time. But if you're raised in a way where you get everything you want, it's going to be a harsh reality once you become an adult. And I think that's part of what we talk about in this podcast as well. Is just you gotta face that adversity. You gotta do dumb shit and get in trouble. You gotta toe the line sometimes, like you and I did, with back and forth and set boundaries. And then you also got to realize there's consequences and then learn from them. That's part of being a human being and a person, is you got to make mistakes. I mean, failures, I think, one thing I've learned throughout my career is I don't see failure as a negative. I really don't. I see it as a positive because it's just brutally honest, and there's no political correctness around it. There's no sugarcoating. There's no bubble wrap. It's like you failed, and then what you do after you fail is the important thing. Is I'm going to write down why I failed, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And we've lost sight of that. We don't want people to fail. So we don't want you to have a bad day or a bad game because it's, we'll feel bad for you. It's like, no, you need those things, right?
I couldn't agree more. It builds character, builds toughness. That's not reality where, everybody gets a gold star and an A on your paper. It's just, and you got to work at it. And if you want something, put a plan together. You obviously, through these podcasts, people will learn of your entire journey. And again, hopefully there's some young guys out there listening and will follow suit. So I think this is awesome what you're doing. But yeah, guys that get it figured out are certainly going to be successful in anything they do in life. But it's just the plan and the work ethic today is just not what it once was, in my opinion. So we got to find a way to get people back to earning something and working towards something in anything we do. But you're a great example for that.
Totally agree. Well, big thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, as you were a big part of my journey, even though it was really a year and a blur at times, and just for letting me be me. You didn't try to change my personality or who I was. You understood that I am a hothead at times. I am fiery, but when our balls are on the line, I'm going to be there for you just as you were for me. So big thank you, and really appreciate the time.
You're the best, my friend, and enjoy retirement. And our paths will cross again at some point. But proud of you, Bogues.
You too. Enjoy retirement. Thanks.
So once again, thanks to Ray Giacoletti for joining us. It was a great chat. We haven't caught up for that long since I left college, essentially. To chat for an hour plus. Albeit via a podcast. You have to love technology. It was. I'm sure it was emotional for him as it was for me. It was something that brought back very good memories of a great time in my life. I guess when you're in the moment sometimes and you're trying to win games, you probably don't enjoy it as much as you should. But that was a really, really good time in my life. Really, really enjoyed it. Ray Giacoletti was a huge part of that. And like I said earlier, he let me play. He gave me the keys to the team. We mentioned, all the statistics of how well our team did in that interview with Ray Giacoletti, and we made the NCAA tournament, went to the Sweet 16, and then it ended. So what happens after it ends? Now, the tournament ended in March, obviously March Madness. It ended in March for us. I think that the championships usually end of March, start of April, so it can cross over a little bit. But the decision then for me went along the lines of this. I'm not going to be able to train on college campus because there's a 2-hour a week rule where you can train 2 hours and with your teammates and whatnot. So I'd sat with my agent who I'd signed with, David Bauman, who will hopefully get on the pod down the track, and discuss the next move. And he was adamant. Look, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't taking school too seriously at this point. In my sophomore year, my grades were still good, but I didn't really invest the time I probably should have. Took that for granted a little bit, but my sole focus was getting better at basketball and trying to get drafted. So I took a lot of classes that I knew, I wouldn't be doing down the line, even if I wasn't a basketball player. It was just more of a, I guess, making sure I stayed eligible, pick some classes that were a little bit easier, and just made sure I ticked the boxes to stay eligible, which I did. I mean, I averaged a 3.0, which is a B average throughout college. But then that's second semester, which was right when our season ended. I still had about 6 or 7 weeks left. I think school finished in May. I left. I didn't finish school, and I probably should have finished, looking back, just to close that chapter for my sophomore year. But my stress was that I needed to get better. I needed to get in the weight room. I needed to work out. I needed to work out against NBA talent. And the decision was to fly me out to Washington, D.C., which is where my agent lived. And he set me up with a trainer out there. Intense sessions. There were a few European kids there. One of them was still a good friend of mine, Drago Pasalic, was a Croatian guy. There was also a Serbian kid by the name of Nemanja Alexandrov. So if you look him up, he was projected to be a top 10 pick the following year and then did his knee. So those guys were there. Mike Sweetney actually was also working out with the same trainer as me. So I got to battle against him. And it was just a matter of, doing some individual workouts, some shooting, some weights every day. And school wasn't on the cards anymore. So it was a sole focus of 5, 6, 7 hours of doing something basketball-wise from April till the draft. I was preparing for the draft. So the reason why I left at the end of the day was to make sure that I'm ready for those NBA draft workouts. Now, I'd finished a sensational college year, and a funny story goes along with that, but I get invited to the NCAA Final Four, which is in St. Louis. So I get flown out there by the NCAA because I'm in the running to win a shitload of college awards. So a lot of these big awards are presented on that weekend. You do some of them were during like a breakfast, a lunch, or a dinner. You show up, they announce you as the winner, you give a speech, you meet and greet everyone, you say hello, and you take off. A lot of them are done by sponsors. So I'll read through the list of awards that I won. So we obviously made the Sweet 16, so that was a big part of my success, and I averaged 20 points, 12 rebounds a night, a couple of block shots and a couple of assists. So really, really high clip offensively. Did a lot of different things. Shot threes, believe it or not, at a decent clip, low 30s. So had just a great year. Everything fit in well. So we go along with awards. 2005 ESPN Player of the Year. 2005 will be the year for all these. So I'm not going to keep reading the year, but Yahoo.com Player of the Year, Mountain West Conference Player of the Year, Sports Illustrated First Team All-American, Basketball Times Player of the Year, AP First Team All-American, top vote tally. Won the Oscar Robertson Trophy, CBS Player of the Year, Pete Newell Big Man of the Year, National Association of Basketball Coaches Player of the Year, Naismith Trophy winner, John R. Wooden Award winner. Now, those last two are the big ones. The Naismith Trophy winner is generally the one that's lauded, along with the John R. Wooden Award. So I did both those awards. The John R. Wooden one was done later on in LA. They do it at the LA Sports Club, still to this day, I believe. But the Naismith was done on that weekend, and to sweep those awards was unbelievable. I didn't really even know some of these awards existed, to be honest with you, like the Big Man of the Year and all that kind of stuff. So I believe those trophies are somewhere. I think a lot of them at my parents' house. Yeah, so I got to track those down one day. But there were some big boys to get those back to Australia. There was some big trophy pieces. A few of them broke in customs and whatnot. But we've got all those somewhere. But that was the year that I had individually. I played very, very well. Sweep the awards. So a funny story that goes along with that. I get flown out to the Final Four. I go to the semi-final games, which were on the Friday night. I remember it was at the football arena, a football stadium there in St. Louis, so it was packed. And I remember there were some seats that were kind of had no view of the court because I was just blocked out with like extra seats that they'd added or whatnot. And it's a football stadium, so there's going to be some seats where you can't really see the court, and even those seats were sold. So those got sold at like a 90% discount, and people would go just to be part of the atmosphere, and they just watch on the big screen. But it was unbelievable to experience that. Now I had tickets comped by NCAA for both those games, so semifinals and finals. The finals was a Monday night. I was actually flying out Monday morning, so I had 2 tickets. Don't forget, at this point, I'm still a college kid with a college brain. Don't have $1 in my pocket. I decide to scalp those tickets. So I end up scalping them. I'm not even sure who I went through. Ended up finding a broker that scalped them for me, and I think I made $3 or $4 grand from those tickets. So just got an envelope with some cash in it, gave the tickets away, and that was I assume is illegal still to this day, but which I'm not sure why, but your tickets, but ended up selling them, making some cash to the NCAA. So anyone out there listening from the NCAA, really appreciate getting some money out of you. So it was pretty hard for the last 2 years, as I've discussed at length in episode 4, 5, and 6. But thank you very much for that. So we then go from there, go back to Utah, pack my stuff up, say bye to everyone, and I'm going to Washington, D.C. to work out and get ready for the next chapter of my life, which is the NBA draft. Still kept in touch with everyone from school, followed the program even beyond that year, but it was hard. It was heartbreaking. Everyone knew that I was leaving before I even announced it, but it was still a very hard announcement because you just felt like family at the University of Utah. It's still a really special place in my heart, a time that, like I said, I really, really enjoyed. So ended up going back, which we'll discuss later on, my rookie year, I believe it was, over All-Star Weekend, had my jersey retired by the University of Utah, the number 4. It's still hanging up there in the Huntsman Center, and one of the few players. A lot of schools have a rule around jerseys being retired. You have to graduate from school and get your degree, and I was not one of those guys, and Ray Giacoletti did me a solid and really went up to the athletic director in the school and was like, this guy needs to have his jersey retired. You know, he's swept every college award. He's one of the best players we've seen in college basketball in a long time, and we should be proud of that fact and really kind of push the envelope to get that done. So couldn't be happier to have my jersey etched in folklore in the University of Utah history books forever. But now a next chapter starts. So that will be the next episode will be the lead up to the NBA draft and everything that goes into all of that. So tune in for that one next. We are at Bogues on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or your social media followings, or even on LinkedIn, believe it or not, YouTube. And then we're on all good podcast platforms. So check us out, share us. Hope you're getting through out of these My Journey episodes. They're doing very, very well. Numbers-wise with views, a lot of people appreciate them. They're pretty raw. At times eye-opening, but really appreciate your listening. I hope you enjoyed the Cody Fueger and Ray Giacoletti interviews, and catch us next time.